All right, 13 KEIN Montana's Comedy Network. This is 13 KEIN News Special Edition. On tonight's show, we are interviewing Jeff Patterson with guest, with my guest here, also Lieutenant Governor candidate Randy Pinocci. How are you doing tonight, Jeff and Randy?
Doing great.
Fantastic. Living the dream.
Living the
Living the
dream. And so, Jeff, my understanding is that uh, your potential when Randy wins is to be the ag director. Is that correct for the state of Montana?
well, that would certainly be Randy's and Tanner's decision on that. But if they offered me the job, I would gladly accept and try to fulfill that duty with passion and pride.
Oh, perfect. So tell my audience, but we've got an audience about 200,000 people, and so no pressure here. But Jeff, they're wondering, what is ag?
Egg. Wow, that is such a great question, Chris. Egg is life. If you eat, you're in agriculture. If you have a lawn, you're involved in agriculture. I am so blessed to actually to be part of agriculture. We raise cattle and grains and hay. So there's not too many facets of agriculture that I don't participate in. But egg is producing life. That's the biggest thing. And I get to prepare it, produce it, grow it, protect it, sustain it. And that's for not only just plants and animals, but for people as well. So that's pretty much what egg is. Egg is life, really.
Well, perfect, perfect. So, okay, so coming into being the potential ag director for the state of Montana, how does ag and the ag industry affect Montana?
Well, agriculture is still the number one industry in Montana. An interesting fact that Montana ranks second behind Texas with a land mass of, with total like 58.1 or 2 million acres in farms and ranches. And interestingly enough, Chris, one of the other interesting statistics of that whole deal is that with all those acres, the average farm or ranch, whatever you want to call it, is like 2,200 acres. But we produce so much in the world here in Montana with 27, little over 27,000 people actually doing it. So we're feeding millions and billions of people, literally, with 27,000 people. Montana is such an awesome place to live for the production that we do with agriculture. So I keep coming back to this whole thing. Agriculture is such a privilege. We have that privilege, and it's not just wheat and cattle and sheep and hay, but we also have Christmas trees and we have vegetables and we have potatoes. And I mean, it's such a diverse mint. I mean, gosh, you name it. If we can grow it, we produce it. Flathead cherries. I mean, they're well known all over the place. Man, I love
Yeah.
flathead cherries, I mean, so, and now we're expanding into different things, I mean, we're making wineries and craft beer and just using all types of what we're growing and planting in there. And if you look back in the biblical times, it was an agrarian society that Christ lived with, and a lot of the things and precepts and parables that he talked about were all pretty much agrarian based. So my kind of gripe a little bit is that we've kind of gotten, I think, too many generations away from the farm. And I know Randy and Tanner, they came to my house and they've been at my place and farm, and they've seen what it was. And I would hope that, when they're successful, that they would continue that desire to go on a personal basis, because that's basically what it is. Most farmers and ranchers kind of want to be left alone. Just, I want to do my thing. I want to grow my crops. I just want a fair price, but they're struggling on a lot of fronts on there. And I'm hoping that agriculture in Montana can make a difference for not only the producers, but for the people that are receiving the goods in here. We have the cleanest, freshest stuff, produce that we could possibly have worldwide. Our grain is the top notch, high protein quality. We are the one of the pulse capitals of the world. I mean, for providing lentils, beans, peas, worldwide. in our cattle industry, oh my God, we have some of the best cattle and cleanest, wholesome, even organic, I mean, gosh, we got what, 1.3 million head, something like that, 1.5 million head of here. And, that's down a little bit. The last couple of years, we've had drought and grasshoppers that people have kind of had to sell, but the prices are up and the stocks are low. But man, I mean, you think about it in alfalfa, just the alfalfa alone, Chris. I mean, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, I know, but it's my passion coming out, so I can't help it, right? So this is the whole thing. So we're number 3 in the nation, and number 9 with all hay. So that's like 2.9 million tons with alfalfa and like 4.2 with grass and alfalfa mixed in. So we're kicking butt in the whole United States. California has a lot of stuff to say, but Montana, oh my God. And then we're the headwaters for a lot of these tributaries that comes down out of there. That's a big thing too. And I know Randy's been talking about hydroelectric and some of the other things that's coming on there. We need some irrigation water, and I'm just going to leave that one off right now, but I hope that answered some of your questions. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, uh, kind of, I don't. Do you mind if we get a little personal, kind of go into some history? I'm kind of interested in what you bring to the table to further Montana's egg goals, as well as like, have you lived here all your life? A lot of people talk about being multiple generation Montanans. What's your story?
yep, I'll put it that way. So,
Nice.
uh, my granddad, in fact, I'm up here at Opum right now. We're seeding, in fact, right now as we speak. So, finishing up some wheat. We got some canola in, peas, lentils, and wheat, and hay. Of course, we raise hay and cattle. Um, so my grandpa came over from Arendal, Norway, and homesteaded up here by Opheim. So I'm actually like he'd be the first, my mom be second, and then me that third. So we got fourth
Nice.
generation with my boys here now. And my other grandpa on my Patterson side, Murdoch Patterson, came over from Scotland. He came to Minnesota, fought in the regiment, first Minnesota regiment, first regiment actually, for the Civil War. And then his dad or his boy, my grandpa Jake, came over in early 1900s for the Milk River, worked on the Vandalia Dam, which just happens to be where my main ranch is, on the river, just a little bit downstream from the Vandalia Dam. So what do I bring? I bring generational experience. I bring
Yeah.
a fortitude and a passion. I've been on just about every egg committee that you can think of in the state, either on a state board or a local board. So my desire to serve and to learn and to, um, help out any way I possibly can is, I think it's just developed within me. You know, I don't, I don't look at my neighbor and say, I wonder how I can get his land. I look at my neighbor and say, I wonder how I can help him. How can we work together? Can we fence together? I mean, can we work together? What do you need? You need some parts hauled up from Glasgow to Opheim? I'm coming up today, I mean, sure, yeah. So that's what I bring. I think a working knowledge, a passion about what I do, an excitement about a future to pass on to future generations, um, and a desire, I guess, to really see people succeed. That's
Yeah.
kind of in a nutshell.
Sounds like a third generation Montanan who has Montana's like goals and and well, pretty much everything Montana in mind. And that sounds like you're the expert. That's personally
Oh,
what I want to see is experts up there. And so, hey, this is great. Let's continue on in the interview here. Um, what are your thoughts on job creation for Montana when it comes to ag?
oh gosh, sky's the limit. I mean, we have opportunities. Look like for instance, the wool industry. Let's take that for instance. They've been kind of struggling with wool prices. There's been some thought about, grinding up some wool or pressing it out and using it for fertilizer. They've been talking about using wool that they can't sell that's a lower price for insulation, which is really great. We have really good wool here in Montana. In fact, the wool growers is an older organization than the stock growers by like, I don't know, 1 or 2 years. I don't think there's somewhere on there. I can't
Yeah.
remember the exact dates, but I mean, so I think we can do value added on a lot of different things. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is visiting with the um, ag minister up in Saskatchewan, which would be our counterpart. And he was talking about going to different places and finding value added markets, developing markets for other things. When I was in the legislature, which I was way back 20 some years ago, I went on a junket to China, well, Taiwan, I guess it's kind of China, and Japan. And when we were in Taiwan, Chairman Fu, who is the head of the Wheat and Barley Committee over there, brought out a bag, and we were talking through interpreters and stuff of some wheat from Montana, and he passed it around, and I looked at it and I thought, that is the crappiest sample of wheat I've ever seen in my life. And I kept looking at it, and then it had sprouted white wheat in it. We don't grow that in Montana. That had to come from like Washington, or somebody dumped it in or whatever. Anyhow, I couldn't hold back. And Ralph Peck was our director of ag at that time. Just a super neat guy. I learned a lot from him when I was in there in the agriculture chairing subcommittee for natural resources on approps. And I told Chairman Fu, I said, I don't know where you got this, but if you think this is Montana wheat, you got schnookered. And I will guarantee you, you come over to Montana, I will take you up and down the High Line. You pick any place, we'll stop and take a look at their bins. You will never find this crappy wheat anywhere that we have. And I think he just smiled. I think it was a test, basically, to see if we knew what we were even selling, or not.
Yeah.
But I think those are some things that we need to do. We need to step up and step out to some of these other countries and stuff. If this is truly what they're getting and calling it Montana wheat, we need to put a stop to that, not only soon, but immediately. That's crap. And I think as governor and lieutenant governor, I think Randy and Tanner probably agree with that a lot. I know Randy likes to have quality stuff and talk about being ethical. That I think is very unethical. And I think agriculture, for the most part, most of the people are about as honest as you can get. So
Mhm.
value added to answer your point, what else could we do? I mean, gosh, besides going to other markets and like we could go to sell things to direct. I would like to try to do that. Um, we got some pretty good people in Department of Agriculture right now, over 100 employees, and between managers and head people there. I think that give them a little bit more free reign and give them some incentives to come up with some creative ideas. There's nobody's an island, right?
Right.
So and you got to surround yourself with people that are smart, creative, innovative, and I think sometimes what I bring to the table maybe would be is a passion and a desire to see people exceed above where they think their potential is. And I think in agriculture we can do better, and we are, but there's things that are out of our control, weather, markets. But let's do some stuff with the markets, and we can tweak that one a little bit. The farm bill, the federal government has a lot to do with what we do in agriculture in Montana and the United States, actually. So, but I think as a state, we can come up with some creative ideas to help with the marketing. So that's kind of a nutshell too.
Hey, so Randy, how about you chime in? What are your thoughts on job creation for Montana when it comes to ag?
Well, first off, we should start with I've been one end of the state to the other campaigning with, say, everybody running for Congress, people running for Senate, Tanner and I running for governor and lieutenant governor. And what surprised me is the only race that's focused on having ag involved in the race, or trying to say we need a director of ag, we need to bring ag into our campaign, is the Tanner Pinocci campaign. There isn't a single person running for a major office that has any person prepared to be the director of ag once they win. And I guess I bring that experience working with our US Senator Conrad Burns or US Congressman Rick Hill or Governor Judy Martz, where working with them in the past, uh, working directly with ag is important because it's our number one industry. Jeff and I have been working together on ag issues for years. We're currently involved with a company trying to nurture it and understand what the benefits would be of manufacturing fertilizer in Montana. Yeah, fertilizer is imported from China and India. To manufacture it here in Montana would be really important because it would bring the cost down to where it would be more affordable to buy fertilizer within the state, and it would create over 1,000 jobs. And a company has millions of dollars lined up to start this in my eastern district where I oversee the Public Service Commission. And so I think this is just one of the things that Jeff and I are looking at. But more importantly, if you're going to want to lead Montana, and ag is our number one industry, you'd better have a handle on that and somebody in place. So if Tanner and I win this, I'm going to have, key farmers involved with how we can do things a little better. And I'm hoping that, Jeff would be our director of ag. So those are some ideas I have. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect. So, well, I've got you on this one. What are your thoughts on the transportation of oil in the state, and how does that affect ag and or Montana in general?
Well, that's a good question. And when the Bakken oil boom developed, we now produce more oil in the Bakken than Texas does. But keep in mind, the Bakken is in Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, part of Canada. It's a kind of a big circle. And what happened is we started shipping this crude oil by train. And what happened to the farmers was the price to move their ag, grain, and so on increased in price. And one of the benefits to having the pipeline installed was it would bring that cost back down, I believe. Also, transporting crude oil and petroleum by pipeline is safer than train. So those of you that are environmentalists, the pipeline is safer, okay? We can put a pipeline in underground. You don't even know it's there. The tax revenue for several counties was in the millions of dollars. And we created jobs and income. So that is just one aspect. And keep in mind that when we buy fertilizer out of state or out of country, a good portion of the price, at least some of that, is transportation. If we manufactured fertilizer here, it would be cheaper simply because we don't have to pay for shipping from wherever it came. And then supplying our neighbor states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Canada with fertilizer made in Montana would be a tremendous benefit. So anyway,
Right.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and Jeff, maybe you could chime in on your thoughts too, being as well, the cost and transportation of oil does directly affect you. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, well, it's just another input. I mean, gosh, when Trump was president, we were down like $2. Now we're over $4 for fuel. Everything that we do, we have to ship by, truck it off. We got combine expenses, we got spraying expenses, we got all the other chemical expenses that comes down with that whole thing. I think that what Randy said was spot on. I mean, the jobs and the money that we could come, the safety of it, the whole thing. That's a big issue. I think agriculture, we kind of get maligned sometimes, but we are the original environmentalists. So I eat the cattle that eat the grass on my ranch. I raise wheat and grains, and I eat those grains. We grind up our wheat and some of it, and vegetables and stuff. Why in God's name would anybody think that I would pollute my own family or whatever? I mean, or the waters. That is just the most ludicrous thing that I've ever heard. But I mean, there's people that actually want to promote that deal there. So safety is a big deal, and I think that pipeline would be a really a good factor to it. So what we do in agriculture here is it's all directed on inputs. I mean, we have really no control over the price of oil or fertilizer and whatever. So if we could get a fertilizer plant, bring those costs down, those inputs down, that's all relevant. That's more money in the pockets for Montana's farmers and ranchers. And then that dollar spins around 8 times on a local basis there. So it's not going off to wherever, Timbuktu. We're spending that on a local basis. We have egg dealerships, we have clothing stores, we have supplies and parts and everything else that comes out of there. Gosh, what a farmer brings in like $1 million in a year, what he actually puts in his pocket at the end of the year is not very big, for a lot of things when you think about the expenses on it. Combines are, shoot, you're almost getting up to about $1 million, for some of that stuff. That's just the cost of doing business, and it's not
I've
fun, but that's the way it is. So.
Yeah, I definitely know the cost of equipment. I've been looking to try to buy a mini excavator for some projects I'm working on, and wow, it's
Yeah.
it's insane. One of the questions that I was going to lead into is how do we bring the price of gas and oil down? But Randy kind of touched on it with the pipeline pretty well. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that Randy is spot on. I mean, he's done a heck of a good job as public service commissioners. He's been out and he's seen Eastern Montana where we have a lot of gas and oil, and we can come up with some, I think, creative ideas on that whole thing. As far as the agriculture sector, I think that what we produce out here is we have potential for wind farms. I'm not a big fan of them, but I mean, it can create some electricity and maybe lower the cost on that. I think our local co-ops are doing a phenomenal job. I mean, when you think about it, when in the middle of the storm, you got somebody out there leaving his house, warm house, going out there trying to get the lights on for you again. Man, I sure appreciate those people. The service industry that we have that works and cooperates with agriculture. Those are all vital people. I think that we partner with. I mean, if I'm running out of fuel, I call Ezzy's or whoever, Eggland. Hey, I need some fuel. What's the price? Can you wait? I really need it. Well, they bring up a semi and we dump some fuel in the trucks and in the tanks and we get going there. So those are some things. If we could have more of a local market on some of that stuff, I think that would help out a lot. How do we do that? That's a tough deal. That's because we're doing like oil seeds, right? Camelina, canola, a lot of those crops, a lot of stuff actually, Chris. This is kind of interesting when I was thinking about it. So the canola is a high omega-3 that we're growing now. That doesn't really necessarily go to feed people directly. It's actually going to feed salmon on these salmon farms to bring up the color content of the salmon, and then kind of an indirect deal there. I'm thinking like we raised camelina one time, and that was being crushed for like jet fuel and military stuff. So I think maybe some of
Really?
that stuff we can do. Women in farm economics, they were talking about ethanol. That was kind of a big boon at one time
Yeah.
that we could make ethanol plants and stuff. I actually had a bill that would incentivize to have ethanol in Montana, lower the tax on it a little bit, and then you could put it at the pump if you wanted to put ethanol in. It was an incentive, and I believe personally, incentives work a lot better than regulations and penalties. That's for sure. So
Right.
anyhow,
Right. Randy, did you want to talk a little bit about some of your thoughts on how to bring the price of gas and oil down other than the pipeline?
Well, let me drill. I need permitting. In North Dakota, South Dakota, you can get a permit in a couple of weeks. I have people in Montana that have been waiting for a permit for 20 years. And we really have to take a look at our permitting and make it similar to what is in North Dakota and South Dakota. I was in Baker, Montana a few days ago with the Montana Public Service Commission, and they have over 1,000 active gas wells, natural gas. And I'm bringing natural gas in the wintertime from out of state, to keep our homes heated. And keep in mind, if we're going to use natural gas to generate electricity, that's a lot of natural gas. The Laurel power plant that'll generate electricity with natural gas could use more natural gas than the whole town of Billings. Okay.
Wow.
Because you're going to be running these turbines 24/7 and really, producing a lot of electricity, and the amount of natural gas you're going to need is a lot. Well, if we are restricted on supplying the natural gas, the price goes up to buy natural gas. When I bring it in from out of state, sometimes I have to pay twice or three times as much, but I have all the natural gas I need underground. Just let me get it and I'll bring our costs down. Electricity is the same way. I don't make enough electricity in Montana to supply Montana. And when I bring it in from California or Oregon, sometimes we pay 10 times more for it. So I got an idea. Let me produce more electricity and I could be exporting electricity. And when I have more electricity being made, I'll bring the price down. Let me open up coal strips units 1 and 2. Let me put a nuclear power plant in. And today a nuclear power plant is the size of a Walmart, and you don't have the big stacks, and you can put it underground. And I don't have any carbon output. Natural gas, has little carbon output when you burn it. Nuclear energy has none at all. So let me drill, let me produce more energy than the state needs. Let me be an energy exporter. Let me export crude oil. Let me export natural gas. I'll make our lives better and I'll bring our costs down. And
Amen.
Farming
Amen.
community would love to see that. Okay.
Amen.
Yeah, and to that point, Randy, let me build that nuclear plant because I'd personally love to. It's kind of a dream for me. Ultimately, radio was never my thing. I wanted to go into research and development, right? And I wanted to build future tech. So one of my future tech things is fusion power, which they are actively building in other countries. We don't have that here. So I know I'm not the guest speaker, but that's really a passion of mine as
No,
well.
I like
Uh,
it. I
but
like it.
well, definitely. And leading into this, I've been kind of curious myself because we've been talking about the railroads a bit. I understand that a lot of the railroads are subsidized by federal dollars. I believe. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But do you know who actually owns the railroad?
Well, a fellow named
Well,
Warren, I think so.
we have Montana Rail Link, which is a Montana business. They own a certain amount. Burlington Northern, Santa Fe own quite a bit. I regulate some safety standards for the rail industry. The Public Service Commission actually was put in charge of railroads back in the 1800s, okay, to make sure that the railroads didn't take advantage because they had a monopoly on bringing in cattle or taking in our sheep industry. There used to be more sheep than people in Montana for many, many years.
Yeah.
And, you depended on the railroad and their fairness, and the Public Service Commission really was put in place by the legislature to make sure that that was done fairly. And we do have people transportation across the High Line, so you can get on a train in New York and go to Seattle. But there's a lot of talk of transporting people from say the High Line down to Missoula, Missoula to Helena, Missoula to Bozeman. There's a lot of talk about transporting people on train and growing that industry. But as safety goes, when you haul people on the track, the safety standard's a little different to how you look at the safety standards for cargo, right? And we just had a major accident a couple of years ago where there was a loss of life on Amtrak going across the High Line. And actually, I had railroad workers that Jeff Patterson knows that warned me that we have to be a little bit more careful with our inspections, and actually brought that up where I wanted another rail inspector or two before the accident happened. And I was denied. And now we're hoping the legislature is going to take that more serious.
Right.
and have a better safety standard for rail safety. So I'm supposed to be getting a couple of new rail inspectors, and we're going to start inspecting track. And I hope to be doing the new inspections within the year. Yeah.
So, Jeff, from your perspective, since we're on the topic of safety, oil, and transportation, how does that affect the ag industry?
The rail business, you mean, or
Well,
all the transportation?
in general, safety and transportation of like energy, crops, um, anything that needs to be transported.
Yeah, well, our Department of Transportation does a pretty decent job as far as having standards and stuff. I actually had some legislation when I was in there to help some of the farmers and ranchers. In fact, one of the bills that I had was uh, I don't know how much safety it was, but it kept a lot of magnets off the road. Permanent licensing on trailers, boats, toys, motorcycles, yeah, other things on that. But I think going down the road, you're just trying to do the best you can with what you got. And I see an awful lot of trucks up and down the road. The highway system is kind of choked up. Sometimes people don't realize that, you have to move equipment and they get a little impatient. And that causes me a lot of concern. When somebody whips around a big air seeder or whatever and could almost runs head into somebody else because they were just a little bit impatient. The farmers, most of them are pretty conscious about who's behind them, and they'll try to pull over as best they can. But sometimes, honestly, Chris, there's no shoulder, so you just you try to do the best you can. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I worry about as far as safety is not so much what I'm doing, but what somebody else might do potentially because of what I'm doing. So that I think everybody thinks about that. You're going down the road with, gosh, you got 80, 90,000 pounds, with a truck. You can't stop on a dime, just like a train, it takes a while to slow down, and
Right.
somebody pulls out in front of you, you just don't have a chance. I mean, it's just, I think people really need to be conscious and cognizant. That's where I came back to that whole deal again about we're kind of too many generations removed from the farm to understand what it's like. I mean, we're all in a hurry. We all got things to do and get things going. But I think just a little bit of the safety issue is like no farmer or rancher driving a truck or equipment or whatever wants to see anybody get hurt on anything at all. That's the bottom line. I mean, perfect.
Yeah, and then, and part of why I talk about that in these interviews is that, you can work with the Department of Transportation to ensure that the highways are as safe as they can potentially be, but they can only be so safe. Obviously, there's things you have to look out for. And you're absolutely right when you've got like a 90,000 pound semi. That's a pretty heavy semi. Doesn't stop on a dime. Um, so next question, are there any deals that are out there or anything that's out there you think could benefit Montana regarding our ag and energy industries?
Any what?
Any kind of deals or anything that like we're not already doing that could benefit and help grow our industry?
Producing fertilizer, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah. We could. I mean, Randy talked about that about bringing some fertilizer in. The water is a big deal there. I mean, we need to keep our water rights. That's got to be a number one issue that we need to really work with the water courts on. The state of Montana actually wanted to have uh, take the water rights on state lands, and our land board at least overturned that water court deal there, which was, thank God we had that, so that would be a big deal. Chris, can I say one thing, maybe a little bit veer off, but this is really near and dear to my heart, right?
Go for it.
So one of the things, you talk about value added and everything else. I'm thinking about the guys that are here already in agriculture, right? My heart goes out, and this is where I'm at. I mean, the average age is 65, so we're thinking about transitioning our farms and ranches to future generations. Hopefully that we've done a good enough job and we've left it well enough that our kids can have, so there could be another generation that comes on this whole thing, right?
Right.
But when you get behind the ball financially or whatever, I mean, these guys are good farmers. It's just that 3 years of drought and grasshoppers, and you didn't cut a crop, and you had to sell half your cattle herd. I mean, in the last couple of years, Phillips and Valley County probably lost 40% of their cattle because there was nothing to graze on. You know, so you don't have any choice. Well, there's part of your income that's gone. And then you start looking at, well, now I can't do this, and my machinery's broken down or it's getting old and I can't get parts anymore. And then you start degrading really bad. I mean, as far as what your anticipation, your goals, and what you really wanted to do. And Chris, this is the part that really kills me. Is there's a shame and a I don't know how to say it, a kind of a depression that comes over a lot of agriculture people. You know, Montana is third in the country for suicide. I mean, and this is a big thing for me. It's a personal deal, but I mean, how do we pass it on to our kids? How do we do this other stuff? Mental health. I think that's the biggest thing. Farmers and ranchers are terrible, actually, absolutely terrible for the most part, about expressing what's going on inside the cranium, right?
Right.
Because they have such a pride and such a joy of what they're doing, and they can't think of anything else that they'd rather do but produce, sustain, protect, life. That's what we are. That's agriculture. And when that starts to degrade, it's just that it really wears on you. And I think it's I would like to see more of an emphasis on mental health in agriculture as a whole type thing, where we could have something where we could change that whole dynamic, where we don't have to go to a funeral or go to an auction sale or go to something else because somebody didn't have somebody there to help them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think most farmers and ranchers are really because they're thinking like, I could be the next one, right? I could be the guy that lost it all, and I have nothing else to go for. There's no safety net. There's nothing out there. What am I going to do? I mean, I have nothing to live for. That's a terrible, when you don't have hope of
That's
a
a terrible
future or
spot.
anything else. It's a terrible thing, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
And it just eats at me. I've seen too many of my neighbors and family and whatever else all around that have just like checked out because they just couldn't handle it anymore. And I don't know exactly, I'm not an expert on it or psychologist or whatever. I just know that my heart goes out. And I think our people in Montana, Chris, above agriculture, our people are the number one resource and the number one industry that we have. We have some of the greatest people. I've been around the world literally, and I keep coming back to Montana thinking, you can walk up the street and see somebody, take a smile, say hi, shake their hand, whatever. You don't have to worry so much about
Yeah.
being mugged or whatever. Honest to God, we have the greatest resources, our people. That's our number one thing in agriculture, I think. And in that industry, that's what I'd really like to see protected and
Yeah.
enhanced a little bit is that dynamic. Does that make sense? I hope it does. So
No, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you talk about, for instance, you know, people who don't have anything to leave this thing that they built to, where the kids are running off to college to go be whatever big city thing they want to be. And I think that part of the reason why we need leaders like Tanner and Randy and yourself in government is so that you can help emphasize that to the younger generation and help them to understand that that's a good thing to have. Like, we have good people in Montana, and so it's a good thing for that younger generation to be interested in. I think a lot of younger people often get confused when they go, what am I going to be when I grow up? Well, there's a stigma on farming in the big city. Okay, great, but they're Montanans, and that's a cultural thing that they
yeah,
should seriously be proud of. um
amen.
kind of handing off to Randy there a little bit. What about you? Where do you stand on this?
Well, we've got to take a look at the tax situation in Montana. Greg Gianforte sharply increased taxes. As I travel and I listen to politicians speak, they say our number one resource is our children. Well, I'll tell you, a number two resource may be our retired senior citizens. And the bottom line is other states are competing for those senior citizens who've saved money their whole life. Places like the state of Florida or Arizona. And what they're advertising is if you sell everything in Montana and move to Florida, you'll be taxed less and you're going to have a more comfortable retirement. My farmers that are retiring, their taxes are so high on some of these properties that it's like paying rent. You don't really own anything. So an idea Tanner and I have developed is if you're retired, you don't pay any taxes on the home you reside in. Okay. Now that wouldn't allow somebody to have several homes and not pay
Yeah.
taxes on them, just the home you reside in.
So like a
Because
homestead.
I have retired people that are saying we can't afford the property taxes. Just in the last few months, they've been reaching out to me and they're selling and moving to Florida or Arizona or Wyoming that have much better tax laws. Montana is expanding. We have record construction. We have, we're having more people move into the state than ever before. We should be able to financially handle things without raising taxes to a record amount. There was actually a lawsuit filed by the Supreme Court to the counties to force them to raise their taxes. And I've got people saying, look, I can't afford to pay more taxes on my property and the higher food costs and the higher energy costs. And I'm going to tell all of you right now, as a public service commissioner, your energy costs are going to get more expensive. They're going to go up again until we start manufacturing more electricity and natural gas than what we need. When you put all of that weight on the shoulders of Montanans, I believe that is increasing the suicide rate. It's causing people to take a look at selling out and moving to a state like Florida. We're losing our senior citizens. So I think that if we take a little pressure off of the higher taxes and let me produce more energy and I can bring these costs down, people will be in a mentally healthier place. Does that sound to make sense, Jeff?
Yeah, and Chris, can I dovetail a little bit on something else too that I mentioned there? When I was talking
Absolutely.
about that is like communication. So we have some great egg groups, stock growers, grain growers, wool growers, conservation districts, Farm Bureau. I mean, a whole bunch of them in Montana that they're all dealing with egg. I would really like to see more of a cohesive collaboration and communication component put down from the governor's office with these egg groups so that we could have some panels and talk a little bit more about what we can do collaboratively together, and come together and communicate that a little bit. Because in every segment, there's always these little niches that nobody knows everything about if you're in one or the other or something else on it. And I think it would really be beneficial from the governor's office perspective to allow that to facilitate and to have that like a kitchen table talk, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, what's going on in your industry? Let's get together and have this whole thing. And I think that could be a great component because honestly, communication is really the key on anything. There's so much discovery that comes up with it. What worked for you? Hey, Chris, what worked for you? Randy, what worked for you? Well, that worked for, well, this is what's working for me. Well, this is kind of cool. Maybe we could work something together and do it together. Like even the granting deal there that we have in government with, the agriculture grants, DNRC has a whole bunch of granting and stuff. Can't we combine or coordinate some more in a greater focused area on some of the granting and stuff to help some of these guys out? I mean, when it comes down, when they say it's not the money, Chris, it's the money, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the long and the short of it, really. But I think that's one of the things. And Randy was spot on with taxes. I mean, good Lord, when you think about the mill levies that get passed around. Well, it's just like, it's only $10 on a $100,000 house. Who has $100,000 house anymore, right?
Right. Right.
So, I mean, they're $850,000 is the medium house in Bozeman and in Gallatin anymore. And so in a ranch, so if you got like, you do the math real quick, if it's $10 on $100,000 house, you know what it is on $1 million or $2 million or $3 million ranch. So
Yeah.
that's all kind of a deal. And anyhow, I think communication and bringing these ag groups together would really be, and they're doing it somewhat already, but I think to a greater degree, I think would be really I would like to see that happen more. And I think Randy and Tanner in the governor's office could help facilitate or at least put a stamp of approval on that.
So I'm glad you touched on that because in the business world, we call it business networking and business mentoring. And so far from the majority of, campaigns, I don't see a lot of that ever being proposed. I have seen it from Randy and Tanner, Tanner and Randy. I don't know if I'm supposed to say them in order or not, but I've seen it from those two quite often. They always talk about networking and bringing people together, and I think that that's super important as well. I'm just kind of curious, you know, the- and I'm sure we could probably all guess, but would you mind sharing your political affiliation with the audience and what you're involved with as far as civics?
Randy or me?
Well, you, Jeff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, we all know Randy is Republican. He,
Oh, okay. Well, I ran as a Republican back in 2000 when I was elected, and I'm in the Central Committee, acting chair for the Valley County Republicans right now. That might change when we have our voting coming up after the primary. Um, Actually, if you really want to know the truth, I found out what it was. I was listening to mainstream media the other day, and they were talking about the most dangerous political group in America, and they were called Christian nationalists because
heard
gas
about it.
yeah. What a bunch of terrorists, they're worse than all these other things because they actually believe that their rights come from God and not from government. Well, I thought, well, hallelujah. That's I guess now I know what my new label is. So
Yeah,
um, in civics, I believe that people have a personal duty to look after their fellow man. I believe the biblical principles totally, all right, that I think we as a church need to look over our orphans, widows, infants, indigents, people that don't have a chance. One of the passions that I have is a school of the deaf and blind. I think people that are born, with infirmities that beyond their control, I think we have a moral obligation to help people out like that, and help them thrive. I mean, you want to know how to love, Chris? You go to a group home someplace, and I'll tell you what, you'll come out of there with more hugs, more attaboys and high fives than you ever thought you could ever have and handle. And sometimes it puts me to shame, to be honest with you. I worry about little things that maybe I shouldn't worry about, and I can get around some group home crowds, and it just lightens me up. So I guess I don't know how to say it. My civic deal is, it's kind of like what the Bible said, what Jesus said, right? So, and
right.
I'm not a preacher. I'm more like a Peter than I am than anything else. You know what I mean? Like whatever. But he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, right? That's a great thing. I mean, what's wrong with that? And then Jesus said, and the second commandment is a lot like it. And if you can do this, it's really good. And it's love your neighbor as yourself. So I think between the two of those, if we could get that into our hearts and into our minds, I think life and society is actually going to be a lot better instead of a cutthroat whatever it is out there. And that's kind of where I feel like I've always been, is like, how can I help? I mean,
Hmm.
I never felt like as a politician, more of a statesman. My idea was, and gosh, when I was in Helena, I think I did more educating about agriculture than I did anything else, I mean, as far as like whatever, you got to be a spokesman for the passion that you have. And believe me, I've got a lot of passion for what I do and what I believe in. And sometimes that's a little offensive to people, but I think they'll get over it in
Yeah,
time. But
yeah.
I kind of prescribe right now more to I'm more of a Republican, but I guess in the Republican faction, I'm definitely I will always be right of center. And I think I like that idea that term, a Christian nationalist. For whatever reason, I get a kick out of that. So that's my term.
So the Democrats have started the whole far right, what they call Christians far right, the Christian nationalists, and they talk about all of that. And I've had some conversations with some of them about that, and the reason that they're trying to do it is they're trying to label just everyday average Christians as the enemy. Well, that sounds kind of like something Satan would do, in at least how I understand it. So I mean, it's all good, right? But I kind of like to know, a little bit where the people that I support sit, and as far as how if they get elected, how are they going to treat things in government? I obviously, for instance, wouldn't put Jasmine Taylor of Great Falls into the ag position, and she would just definitely not fit at all. And that kind of goes the same as if it were to be Zoe Zephyr. It's just not a good fit. There's places for different people, but ag is not the place for them. And so it really uh, it helps our listeners to kind of understand better, who you are when you talk about political affiliations. Um, something something that my listeners have kind of asked about, and it's kind of been just kind of around the rumor mill. I know that Randy, and I'm going to let Randy take this one first. He's kind of been dying to talk about it. Is what's this thing I hear about cool? This acronym cool, and what is it all about? Go ahead, Randy.
Uh, I'm not really sure I understand that question. Tell me a little more about it.
Okay, the acronym cool that I keep hearing about, it has to do with labeling of beef, right?
Okay.
Country of origin
Yeah.
of
Country of
labeling.
origin labeling
And
beef.
it
A lot of my consumers in Montana really want to know where their beef is coming from. We had the mad cow scare, which we haven't heard about in quite a while. But if beef is going to be grown in Montana, and we're going to process it in Montana, and we could label it Montana beef, I believe that the Montana meat buyer is going to grab that package first. And Jeff certainly believes this, and Jeff grows cattle, and he's a cattle rancher, and I believe in my heart that Montana beef will be the first off of the shelf, right? So you've got country of labeling, you've got labeling in our own state, and should this be promoted more? And I believe the cattle ranchers in Montana are going to say yes. And I think Jeff is a good guy to ask that question for. As a person who represents, like 20 some counties, I have to try to listen to all the opinions, whether they're Democrat and Republican, and try to represent them all. But I got to tell you, it just seems like everyone supports knowing. Look, I'd like to know if this is a beef or meat or chicken that's been raised in Montana, and why can't we have it on the label? So I think that should be in front of the legislation, and perhaps we get that passed. Jeff, being you'd be the director of ag, how do you think we would proceed with that? So,
Well, that'd probably be Department of Livestock, but I mean, I think you're right. If you go to, and I won't even name the brand or chain store for hamburger, you could get up to, it did a DNA test, 200 and some different cattle that were put together in that burger. Well, you don't know where they came from. You don't know all this other stuff. I mean, gosh, they come from foot and mouth or something, and the cattle industry that we have is really a safe industry. I mean, in Montana, especially, we have the best brand that you could ever possible. When you mention Montana, what does everybody think about? Blue sky, clean air, clean water, clean cattle, clean grain. I mean, everything that we have to do with that is just like phenomenal as far as that goes, you know. So I think the country of origin labeling, we label shrimp, we label fish, we label, you go to the grocery store, just about everything that you go down to, you're going to see a label where it came from, product to Thailand, product to Japan, product to China, you know, whatever, all the, but beef isn't. Now, I get a little bit odds at sometimes with my cattle friends, but you know, I still think that there's, because well, you mix the cattle in up in the processing plants up there, but I think Randy's absolutely right. If you had a choice to go to a grocery store and you saw product of Montana there, Montana beef, or you had unknown, what are you going to pick? I guarantee you, people are going to pick something that they know. People, you know, when I was in Japan, it was interesting. I looked at some of this grocery stores over there, and they sold a melon over there for like $80. Food for them was a big deal. After we dropped the bomb over there, you know, they that kind of made a whole bunch of people think about their food production and what the future generation was on it, right? So they took that very, very serious about what they were going to do over there. And I think that what we have here too is we have one of the safest food sources in Montana. You know, we have standards, we have things, but we have ethics too. Our seed stock and our cattle are some of the best in the world. I mean, we're shipping our genetics worldwide out of Montana. For goodness sakes, the sheep and the cattle, both. So I think the country of origin labeling, it to me anyhow, this is my personal passion. I'd like to see it put in a place where we can do something. And if we have to put in a packing plant or get something here, let's make some incentives to do that in Montana. For
Yeah.
God's sakes, that's not so hard. I mean, you know, with labor, everybody talks about labor. You got to get these, you know, foreigners to come in, illegals or whatever to come in. Well, I'm not so big sure about that whole deal there, but I mean, all our packing plants, our chicken processing plants, our egg plants, our pork facilities. If you looked at the news and watched the news, Chris, every one of them has been either a fire or something happened, a
Yeah.
plane crash into them, or
Yeah.
what the crap's going on in this world here. Anyhow, I think Montana has an opportunity right now, in fact, to do something more for some of these processing plants to get something here to have some value added as a Montana product. But my God, I just I if I had to choose when I sell beef on my farm, right, and I sell to people,
Hmm.
they know what they're getting. It's all natural. I don't use hormones, steroids, antibiotics, or whatever that I sell and fatten and sell to people. They know exactly what they got. In fact, a lot of them came out, and I've sold them from Washington to North Carolina. You know, people have through my travels, whatever, have bought stuff. They can actually see the cow that I'm going to butcher and that they're going to buy right there and see it fat, and they see what
Wow.
they're eating, and they see what the water they're drinking. It's the same water I drink, right?
Well,
It's
wow.
the same.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I mean,
See what I
why
did there?
can't we do that? That's I think that there's more of an opportunity to do that we have in Montana with, you know, gosh, you know, 1.5 million cattle, you know, we got more cattle than we got people, but and great genetics. So let's do something. Let's expand on
Yeah.
that. But country of origin labeling, to your point, I would like to see that happen more than what it is right now. I think we can. I really do. I really personally believe that we can. So
Well,
anyhow, that's it.
that's really cool. And to your point of 200 different DNA types in a little
Yeah.
thing of beef, I gotta tell you, from the internet generation, that sounds like some OnlyFans level beef. And I think I'd rather have my beef local versus
Amen.
random.
Amen.
That's pretty crazy. Uh, so it looks like we're getting real close to the top of the hour here. I've kept you guys for about an hour. That's quite a long time, but
Oh, I could
it's
talk for a week there, Chris.
yeah, it's definitely been amazing. I did not know as much going into this that about ag as I do now. So I really appreciate you being here tonight to talk about this. And Randy, you as well. Is there anything else that you guys would like to get out to the public tonight before we close?
I'd like to bring up Highway 2. It's the Highline Highway that stretches across the top of Montana. You know, there's been a lot of talk of trying to make it an interstate, and I don't think that's feasible. We just don't have enough traffic. But I do believe that we need to make it a Super 2. Super 2 allows a pull-out lane if you're going to have a right or a left, you're going to have to take. And this allows traffic to safely go around. And I do think we need to start developing a highway to have the room to be an interstate, because, you know, just because Montana is growing, it's eventually going to be one. But I do think that it's not safe the way it is. It's too narrow. We don't have a shoulder. And I think that we can start turning it into a Super 2 gradually. This is something that I want to encourage Tanner and I to focus on if we're able to win this race. And Jeff brought up some good points where it just needs to be wider. I've witnessed on that highway where the striping on the side of the road becomes too narrow, and the striping just starts getting painted in the dirt. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's
You have to
we've got
repaint the
to,
stripe every time you mow the ditch, so.
yeah, we really do need to make some improvements there, and I'm committed to doing that. So I sure wanted to bring that up, but I appreciate that, so I can follow up there. But
Yeah.
Jeff, go ahead and.
So I got one thing I gotta say, and if I don't say it, somebody's gonna scalp me here. So for 25 years, I've been working with the Milk River, and I've chaired the Milk River Watershed Alliance and worked with Jennifer Patrick. She's just a rock star with the Joint Board of Control. DNRC, Mark Bostrom has really done a stellar job helping us out with some of these other issues. But the Milk River, believe it or not, without the diversion in St. Mary's coming down through 2 siphons, 29 miles of canals, 5 drops to drop down into the North Fork, goes up into Canada for 300 and some miles, comes back in at Fresno at Havre in Montana over there, and then another 500 miles comes the confluence over the Missouri River just below Fort Peck Dam there. That is the lifeline of the Highline. There's 20,000, over 20,000 people that really need and benefit from that. When you think about communities, hospitals, nursing homes, schools, colleges, businesses, I mean, everything, that water is king. And I will go to my grave talking about how great water is and how much we need to have that. 6 out of 10 years, that river would be dry without the diversion up there in Bab. And it's going to be, you know, we got like $100 million appropriated through Congress on it, and we've done some work. House Bill 6 and House Bill 8, you know, the legislature's actually done some good stuff there to help getting some funding in it. We have about 600 irrigators that are paying 75% of the cost for maintenance and upkeep on that. And of that money that we send in, Chris, get this, you do the math, right? 40% of that only goes to the project, you know, because they're giving money to administrative costs, lights, pencils, Christmas parties, whatever it is for Bureau of Rec. Now, that's just the way it is, okay? That's the way it was set up. But I'm just saying it's hard to get ahead and fix this stuff. And
Right.
2020 we had a major failure and we got it patched. I mean, we had Sletton Construction and some other people up there that were working on some stuff. They stepped it up. HDR came in, they stepped it up. I mean, we've been so fortunate and so lucky. We only had like 20 weeks, I guess the thing was down completely. But if that thing failed, there isn't enough environmental laws that would could bend in order to have that thing built up again. So it's a very important thing. We feed in the Milk River 1 million people a day out of what we have in that. It's a $2 billion return on the investment that we put out of that whole thing. That's what comes out of that
Nice.
whole river system. So I just want to say that that is one of the things, return on investment, you know, that's a big thing. And any business you're in, Chris, right? the return on investment. If I put in money, what am I going to get back at it? And when you start using taxpayer dollars, to invest in something, you got to have something that come back on it. And that Milk River, what we're putting in that, in investing in that, plus it's just a phenomenal system. You got tribal
Yeah.
nations, you got Canadian nations, and American nations, to get all that. Plus, it's helping out with the mitigation on the pallid sturgeon on the Missouri River for those people that are
Right.
trying to do the test flow stuff. Anyhow, that's probably a topic for another week or
Yes.
something. But
Yes, it definitely could be a topic for another week. We have hit the top of the hour, and so I've got to kind of put a stop right here, a hard stop. I could
oh,
talk
got to
for
say
another
one
hour
more
or
thing
two.
though. One
All
more
right,
thing.
get it in there.
One more thing. Tonight, the Catfish Classic is going on in Glasgow, which brings in a whole
Nice.
bunch of people there. But I told Brenner Flayton, I said, look, you better say something about that Milk River there and the importance of,
Yes,
because without that, you wouldn't have a Catfish Classic. So anyhow, there we go.
absolutely.
And,
That's the plug.
and we got to remind people to vote in the June 4th primary for champion.
Amen.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we do.
And those of you that aren't planning on voting in the primary, look, you can make the difference. This government's your government. You get the government you deserve. Make sure you vote in the June 4th primary.
Amen. Amen.
Well, it's been great having you two here tonight,
Thanks,
Randy and
Chris.
Jeff.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys coming on.
Good questions.
Yeah, it's been definitely a great time. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to cut back to our regularly scheduled programming. And, we will definitely set something else up because I have a feeling you have a lot to say. And also have a pretty good feeling that, you know, Tanner and Pinocci are probably going to win this one. And so that in mind, yeah, we'll be doing a lot more of these. So anyway, to my audience out there, I'm going to go ahead now and cut us back to our regularly scheduled programming. This is Chris Smith with 13 KEIN, Montana's Comedy Network. Have a great evening.